Good afternoon, Mike.
Hello, Peter.
Quite a lot of our talks have been looking at objectives, and I remember the one of the sort of phrases you came up with. This is fuel for the play, and I remember saying just fuel, and you said no, 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 not just fuel. That's absolutely crucial. But without actions, you can't have, an objective cannot happen. In other words, you've got to do something in order to achieve what you want to achieve.
Yes, that's right. Yes, I mean, it's the motivating thing. I mean, I can want to learn Chinese, but unless I switch on the ignition switch and start, using, well, those are very dated terms now. Unless I start to use the fuel that's generated, nothing will happen. And so it gets the actions going, because without actions, the objective is just a fantasy idea.
Okay. But there's another side to this that you want to talk about.
Well, yes, yes.
Now, what do you mean by that?
I want to talk about counter objectives because I didn't include them in the hierarchy because they tend to get lost or muddle the sequence. So, but they are equally important. And what the counter objective is, it is almost the equivalent in strength and purpose and weight as the super objective. Okay? And it is a need or a drive which is actually taking the person or the character in the opposite direction from where the super objective wants to go. So it means that the character is in conflict with herself or himself. There are two conflicting super drives pulling in different directions. And that is very interesting. It isn't always appropriate. You can check when you're working on the character and doing the character lists, which we'll talk about later. But it can be there, and it's very much there, say, in a character like Hedda Gabler, which is really interesting. And I might give you an example at the end of this little talk about it. So what the counter objective is it presents an obstacle to the super objective. Yeah, and it's an obstacle which comes from inside the person. And sometimes it's very difficult initially to try to decide which is the super objective, which is the counter objective. And I will give you the example of Hedda Gabler. I don't know how many people know the play, but this is a play about a woman who's heading for 30, living in, I think, Christiania, which was the provincial capital of Norway in the 1880s, 70s, 80s. It's a very bourgeois, very correct, rather formally religious community. People watch each other and judge each other very, very much. And she gets married at a relatively late date to a man called Tesman, who is a scholar. He loves doing research into the deep past. And the play starts when she comes back from her honeymoon, and she's very unhappy with what she's decided to do. Now, her super objective, her super object, her drive is to exert some influence in the world. Now, she is a woman living in a society which gives absolutely no access to a woman to any sort of power. Mm-hmm. She cannot be involved in politics or social movements or so forth. So she's very limited in what she can do. Good works, I suppose, in charity, but she's very limited in what she can do. And And she's very frustrated. Now, how much of that she's aware of and how much is very deeply in her subconscious, but it's there very, very strongly. And one of the things she's done is to, by marrying this man, she's had some sort of fantasy that she could push him into politics and therefore have some sort of influence over him, which is nonsense because he's simply not temperamentally right to be a politician and has no ambition to be one. Now, her other drive, which is in opposition, or proves to be in opposition to this longing to have influence, is that she is a snob. She is the daughter of a general, very famous and very, very highly established. She's General Gabler's daughter. And in fact, the irony of the play is her single name is the title, not her married name. And she is a snob. And she is horrified if people gossip about her, talk about her. She keeps herself very much away from general society. You know. And during the course of the action, she tries to have influence on a kind of crazy maverick character man who actually exists outside this formal society, with disastrous results which involve her in potential scandal. And she is caught between these two drives, to have influence and to keep a respectable name. And the conflict is so terrible that she kills herself. She shoots herself. And that's a very nice example of two, you know, a super objective and a counter objective coming into direct conflict with each other.
Mm.
Yeah?
Mm.
And you know, you can find them elsewhere, but sometimes the counter objective can be momentary, or it could be a small counter objective, but they're very interesting and they're very worth looking at.
I mean, can you translate this into our ordinary existence? I mean,
well, I've just done a few with her. Okay, yes, this is not quite a counter objective, but when I was young, I longed to work in theatre. I had this feeling, I dreamt about it. And then at that time, people would say, why don't you pick up the phone and talk to so-and-so? I know somebody who knows somebody. Why don't you write a letter? You know, people would try to help me if they had connections or influence. And picking up the phone to call somebody of high status was such torture and torment for me that I would delay it and often avoid it, find excuses for not doing it. So I was defeating the very thing I wanted to do because there was part of me that didn't want to be rejected, I guess, with a great fear of inadequacy and fear of rejection.
mm.
You know, and that's an example. And so, whereas I think most young people today, they're very pushy. You know, when I grew up, we were very correct, you know, very hierarchical, very respectful, and we were in awe of people who were in high positions or people above us. And we didn't go to auditions saying, hi, Mike, how are you? You know, yeah, I'd like to be in your play. You went and waited for people to ask you questions rather than participating as an equal. So it was a very difficult time, but it was very strong in me, and it is in me now still. There are certain people I meet who even now at the age of, in my 80s, I feel, oh, how can I talk to them? I don't know, you know, it's ridiculous, I know. But so somewhere in my childhood, that feeling got formed. I have no idea why, but there it is. So that's an example. It's, let's say, here's a rather cliched one, you know, because I believe that we all do what we want to do in life, that every decision we make is ours. Now, you say, oh, what about the devoted and dedicated youngest or elder daughter of a family who stays at home to look after the parents when she could have had a wonderful career? Isn't she wonderful? You know, sort of ennobling. But the point is that that is the choice she made because she would rather stay at home than take the risk. Her super objective is probably to play it safe in life, and as a counter objective who would love to be somebody of note.
Mm.
Do you see what I mean? So she's staying at home in a way out of cowardice. I mean, she may, it may make her feel good, or it might be that her one objective is to do something that takes her around the world, and the other is a sense of the fear of feeling ashamed if she didn't look after her parents.
Mm.
Do you see? And those two crash against each other. And the one which wins out is probably the super objective, the real one.
So let's say we've got somebody who feels that they need to be respectable. They dedicate their lives to doing their duty, but they meet somebody and they fall madly and illicitly in love with that person. Is that a counter objective, and it destroys their lives because they elope with them?
It depends how you define she wants to be respectable. If they marry somebody who is going to give them a bad name, put them into situations which would be embarrassing, threatening, get them into crime, I don't know. That's a genuine conflict between their values and their inner desire. Now, often falling in love with somebody is a momentary sexual need, isn't it? Not a long-term one. Mm. But if there's a part of her that yearns, I'm saying her, I don't know, if there's a part of them which yearns to be free, then it becomes a genuine conflict.
So can I suggest this and just see whether I'm on the right track? Hamlet's objective is to revenge his father's death, but his counter objective is just to go to sleep, as it were. Whether it's killing himself or
no, that's what he feels at the beginning, pretty much, and it lurks there. But as soon as the ghost comes on and says, revenge me, they're not. Neither of these are actually. This is not his super objective. This is his through line of the play, to avenge his father's death. Now, there's something that stops him getting on with it. It's because he wants to. There's something in him which is appalled by the idea of killing somebody, or that he wants to make sure that he is justified in doing it. Otherwise, he could suffer eternal damnation. I haven't analysed the play, so I'm talking a bit off but it's something which frightens him from taking action. And he's aware he can't take action. He says, when he gets the player rants, does the big speech about Headkeeper. No, who is, what's he to Headkeeper that he would, and because he realizes that he should be feeling more and more truthful than what the player does. And it appalls him. And it's because there's something inside him which is maybe not frightened of killing, because he makes sure that Rosencrantz and Guildenstern get killed, doesn't he?
And Polonius.
Yes. Well, he does that. No, that's not Polonius. That's he thinks it's Claudius, doesn't he? So that would solve the problem. And it doesn't. There's something inside him which can't do it unless he makes sure that what his father said is right. He needs to find what that is. I don't know, because I haven't done an in-depth study of the play. But so he sets up the mousetrap, the play to trap the king. The king reacts appropriately, and he's very excited by it, and he doesn't. So his first thing is to try to sort of make his mother understand that, what she's doing is appalling. And then he thinks Claudius is watching, and he's in the heat of the excitement, he could solve the problem. But of course, it's called Polonius, and that's a huge shock and a setback to one of his missions in life. Do you see what I mean? So, and then he gets sent abroad. He doesn't do anything about it. He doesn't tried to kill Claudius before he's sent abroad. So I honestly don't know what an answer is, but it's something quite existential. It's quite profound and quite deep. Is that what stops you taking action? The sanctity of life. Because at the end, when he comes back from exile, as it were, illegally or secretly, he's very much prepared to die, isn't he? He feels that he's totally changed. He's become very philosophical about that. So he's had an understanding about himself.
Mm.
Yeah, but yeah.
Okay, but now what I want to do is see if we can find a way of you talking about making this practically useful for an actor. And maybe there's some example that you can come up with, apart from Hedda Gabler, where you might have talked with an actor about a particular part with their objective and their counter objective, and where it actually bore fruit for them in terms of their performance. Because this sounds very analytical.
Yes, but so's a super objective until you put into action. So this is part of the actual rehearsal process and getting on their feet. And I can't just give you a neat example of that because it's all part of that huge process of working through the play, on your feet.
Mm-hmm.
Do you see what I mean? These are all the theoretical approaches that I'm talking about now, the ingredients, and then there's the whole thing of putting them all into practice. How do you put objectives into practice? How do you put actions into practice? And that is a whole other area of branch of the work, you see, which needs separate conversation about the practicality. Exercises, improvisations, yeah. So this is purely the ingredients, the sort of concepts that you need for working. So I'd rather not try to answer that now because it means setting up too many other things. So, but it is important, and it can explain for an actor something about the character which confuses them. Here he does this and says this, but here he does that. So what's happened in between? Do you know what I mean? It is an intellectual clarification too, which is very useful.
Yeah.
And again, like the objectives and the actions, they've all got to be got out of the head into the body. And that is a very difficult, or can be a difficult process. Okay?
Now, actually, it suddenly comes into my mind that one of the seminal pieces that you saw as an adolescent was it a priestly play? The woman who you said, was completely respectable. She develops an obsession about
the Deep Blue Sea.
Deep Blue Sea.
The Terence Rattigan play, which is always getting revived. Yeah. This is about a very respectable wife of a judge.
Now hold on. No, wait, Mike. You talked about that way back when you were talking about your adolescence. But yes. What I want you to do, what I want to ask you here is that an example of a woman with a counter objective, as it were?
Yes, that's right, because she does try to commit suicide. And why? Because she's torn in two directions. And finally, she's got nothing to hang into, because basically what it is, she leaves her husband, a very nice, respectable husband, goes and lives in a sort of cheap bedsit with this ex-RAF guy who she finds terribly sexy. And she's besotted with him, absolutely sexually besotted with him. He's not a very sexual man, actually, and he takes a bit for granted. She's not fulfilled by him. And there comes a point when she feels, I'm not getting what I want from him, and I can't go back to my husband now. It's too shaming. And so out of that pressure, she can only see the possibility of taking her life, because both those intentions seem to be wiped away for her. In fact, she's sort of rescued by a wise doctor at the end. But she sees her life differently. But yes, that's a very good example, that she's torn,
Okay.
very much so, and neither of them work for her. Yeah.
Okay. All right, Mike, do you feel that you've kind of covered what you wanted to cover here?
Yes, I think so. Yes.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, then what I suggest is that we bring this little bit to a close and we'll reconvene in a while.
Okay.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
Thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed that chat. And if you did, would you press the like button and also the subscribe button? That would be great. And if you wanted to be given alerts to when the next one is happening, just press the bell button. If you want to put any comments or any questions underneath here, underneath the video, please do. And at some point I will re-interview Mike, as it were, and put some of these questions to him. So I look forward to seeing you again soon. Thank you.